Okay, thanks for joining us for yet another live webcast from the library today. The guys are working, but they've taken a lunch break, so I asked them to be quiet for at least 10 minutes so we can get this done. Hopefully the radial saws won't start too soon. I get a lot of requests for friends on Facebook. I didn't used to, but I get a lot now, and most of them I ignore unless they have somebody. It shows, you have 5 mutual friends, 50 mutual friends, whatever it is, and then at least it seems they're real. Occasionally, or increasingly, I get requests from beautiful or not so beautiful women in little bathing suits who only have one picture and a link to someplace else. I've learned to delete those, so at least you don't have to worry about what's going on here. But this morning, I got a friend request from some guy to begin with. And he had no mutual friends, but he listed himself as a photographer, and I accepted him like that. And the reason I did is because, in my experience, photographers make the best video journalists. In fact, photographers should be video journalists, considering where the industry is going and how hard it is to make a living as a photographer now. We're in a video-based world. Television, for the most part, pays almost no attention to the visuals, which is kind of a tragedy and kind of a function of the technology. For most of the history of television, it was made with these giant cameras that somebody had to drag around on their shoulder, and I'm getting a lot of nasty letters from people at broll.net, but in all honesty, it's very hard to get great composition with those giant things, dragging them around and slogging them around everywhere. You're lucky if you could just put the thing down, put it on a tripod, and hit record. I had this experience, by the way, when we started Channel 1 in London. We started with little Hi8 cameras, and we used it in New York 1 when we started, and the little cameras gave the journalists a kind of mobility that big video cameras didn't afford. And the guy who was running it said, "This is nonsense, we're not doing this." He actually said, "I won't have my people laughed at in the street," which to me was crap. And so he made them all drag around these Betacams. As soon as they dragged around the Betacams, the quality, the visual quality of the thing collapsed. It's a tragedy because television is a visual medium, and it should be powerful visually. My entire life, I've been inspired by the world's greatest photographers. If you want a great book, since we're in the library, this is one I recommend, and you can learn a lot from it. It's the Magnum. It's called Magnum Contact Sheets, and I won't show. I mean, you can look at it, but you've seen all these kind of photographs before. Since we're on Facebook, there's no rights issues. And what makes it interesting is you not only see the photographs of these great Magnum photographers, but you see their contact sheets, and in doing that, you can see how they think and how they see the world. Paul Harvey had a really interesting post about, the camera is something that teaches you to see, and that's what it really does. And guys who are great photojournalists have fantastic eyes, and they see things that other people don't see. So it's been my intention over the last 30 years of doing this to try to marry that kind of visual beauty, that kind of talent, that kind of perception. P.F. Bentley, if you're watching, this is for you, to the medium of television, which is so incredibly visually banal and boring and terrible all the time. So I'll tell you a little story of how we did this and why I'm so turned on to the notion of taking photographers and flipping them into video. First, video, you can make a living. In photography, you can't. Many years ago, in 1992, I think, I started my second business, which was called Video News International. And the idea was to have VJs all over the world. I mean, it shows you it was much too far ahead of its time, but we tried it anyway. And so I had this idea, and I didn't really know how to do a business. And so this business guy took me to see the chairman of Time Life magazines at that time, a guy named Nick Nicholas. He was running what would become Time Warner. This was a big meeting. So I walked in, and I was a kid, and I sat down, and he said, "Tell me your idea." And I explained the idea, and he reached into his desk drawer, and he took out a checkbook and wrote out a check for $100,000. It was a lot of money for me in 1992. And he tossed it at me, and he said, "I'm in," which was great. He was supporting the concept of video journalists all over the world. And he said, "Come with me." And we were in the Time Life building, which was over here on 6th Avenue, and we went down the hall to the offices of Time magazine, and there were some photographers there, and he said, "Take these guys," because they were closing Life magazine, "and turn them into videographers," which was an unbelievable opportunity. So I got exposed on day one to some of the world's greatest photographers, and I see P.F. Bentley is in Molokai. It must be 3 o'clock in the morning. They're the last VNI outpost. P.F., you're like those Japanese soldiers that are still in the Pacific. VNI is over, but we can do other stuff together. But it was these fantastic. PF was the White House photographer for Time magazine at the time, and just you should buy his books. I mean, just a brilliant eye. He sees things in a very different way. And so Nick Nicholas introduced me to these guys and said, do something with them. And the very first video project I ever did, David Kennerly and I went to Cambodia, and Kennerly had never shot video, and we shot a piece for Nightline. Tom Batag at Nightline and Ted Koppel were big supporters of this thing, and that's why the checks, that's right, that's why the checks stopped. And we came back, and it was a clear demonstration that photographers, particularly photographers who know how to tell a story, and if you look at Life magazine or you look at Magnum, these guys are essentially visual storytellers. That, by the way, parenthetically, is why at thevj.com, which I hope you'll all sign up and join or at least take a look at, we teach storytelling to begin with the visuals. We don't write out whole scripts and then wallpaper pictures on top of them to make them match, because that destroys the visual power of television, which it doesn't have much anyway, and it could, or video. Anyway, so I started off with these great Magnum or Time Life photographers and gave them video cameras and put them through the very first boot camp, which we did in Philadelphia. I think, PF, you were in the very first group. And taught them how, of course, we had to figure out how to transit them from stills to video and how to get linear storytelling out of them. And that's still the essence of the boot camps that we run. We're doing one in New York in June, if you want to sign up for that. Lisa and I are actually leaving for London on Saturday to do one in London, if you want to come to that one. But the boot camps were designed specifically to, and are still to this day, to drive the visual storytelling aspect of this medium, and that's really what we focus on. And ironically, one of the very first commissions we ever got was from the Learning Channel, which was just getting started, to do a documentary called Killer Virus, because the guy who ran it, John Ford, had read about Ebola virus and said, can you do something? And ironically, we went on to win a national Emmy for news and documentaries, and that kicked off this Trauma series, Trauma Life in the ER, which was also shot by Magnum photographers. And one of our very first years, we won the National Emmy for cinematography in television, because one of these trauma things was shot by Susan Meiselas, who was a Magnum and still is a world-class Magnum photojournalist. And I think, PF, you were on that, and Bill Gentile, who came from Newsweek as a photographer. That was the team that we sent out. Well, you can imagine the visual quality when you send a team like that to go and do video. So I guess the bottom line for this whole conversation and this whole discourse is that the essence of television is a 99% visual medium. It's about the pictures. But television, and particularly television journalism, pays almost no attention to the visuals. How many times have you seen a news story where it's the same exterior shot of the building and then the yellow police tape, and sometimes they use the same shot 3 times over, which to me is it's criminal not to emphasize the visuals. Now, the world is filled with photographers and people who love photography, and I love photography. I began as a photographer, and there's no question that Instagram has basically eviscerated professional photography, except in the very, very, very high end. People who used to make a living doing photography can't do it or can't make a reasonable living anymore, and newspapers are sloughing off their photojournalists, which to me is terrible. But as newspapers contract and as photography contracts, video is expanding endlessly, because we all have screens, and these screens eat up video. And so photographers, professional photographers, can make a natural and fluid transition to video and television, and to me, that's where they belong. And that's what would really help to improve the medium, because most of the time, if you sit there and you flip through television, particularly nonfiction, television journalism, television news, it is appalling. And it's appalling because, for the most part, it's the way it's done structurally. The way the stories are written is they write up a whole script and they slap pictures on top of the thing. A great photojournalist, again, this comes back to the Magnum book, this is why the contact sheets are so interesting. A great photojournalist will walk into any situation and see things that other people don't see, and capture those things and use those things that they capture to tell a story. And that's really the way that we create videos, and that's what we teach at thevj.com, which I'm going to urge you to go and at least take a look at. In about half an hour, Brett and I are going to be recording a session on 6 secrets of iPhones that you didn't know. And increasingly, of course, the iPhone is a fantastic tool for creating video and visual videos. If you look at our Instagram account, you'll see that I was over at B&H and I was playing around with the new Hasselblad DSLR video camera, which is the other extreme for the iPhone, but the thing is incredibly expensive. But if you got the money, try it. If you don't have the money, maybe you can steal one. Anyway, that's all I got to say for today. If you have any questions, be sure to join us tomorrow, I think. I'm going to try and do a live critique of a video piece from one of our students at thevj.com and do it live here. And you'll get, I hope, some insights into what works and what doesn't work, and I hope you'll find it interesting. But thanks for joining us today. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.